Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I pressed the button. That means we are all here hanging out. Thank you so much for being with us this fine evening. Appreciate you hanging out with us on a Wednesday night. And it is a wonderful Wednesday night at that because you're here hanging out with us too. So, yeah, we've got some things to talk about tonight, don't we? And I think we are going to be in a minor disagreement, perhaps.
Major, minor, whatever you want to call it.
So major. I didn't know about major. I thought maybe minor, but...
Well, we don't know yet. It could be minor, it could be major.
Okay, so yeah, our topic for this evening is going to be, should we as hobbyists be rescuing fish? I know there's a lot behind that particular statement. Lots of different ways we can approach it. And don't worry, we will approach it from a different perspectives. But I've got some things, some opinions, and I'm sure you do too. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. Should we be rescuing fish as hobbyists and what that does to all kinds of different avenues, perspectives, if you will.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what our thing is for this evening. So yeah, glad you're hanging out with us here this fine, awesome afternoon / evening. Things, videos that have come out this week. Might as well just get right into it. So videos that have come out. Let's see here. On Sunday, I took advantage. I took advantage of some tanks that were not yet gone through their weekly cleaning. And really, on the fish room side of things, people ask, well, why haven't you done a fish room tour? Well, there's not really much to tour over there other than some empty tanks right now. I mean, we've got a few tanks that are set up just for enjoyment, but that's really now taken on, the gallery has taken on that role, right? The fish room now is, I would say, 75% quarantine tanks, which we are going to be rearranging the fish room. That's one of the things that we'd like to do over the summer, is because we had an original plan, for those of you who remember, and that was to make the top rows more display type and the bottom rows of the tanks in the fish room more quarantine. And so we're going to be doing that, but for right now, we have a whole bunch of quarantine tanks that are growing various types of algae, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially not bad for a quarantine tank. So I took advantage of that. And I showed many different types of algae and how we either control it or get rid of it. So that was the algae guide. Hopefully that'll be a nice reference for people who are dealing with algae for the coming months and years. So that was Sunday. Monday on the Tank Talk podcast, the podcast that John and I do, we talked about canister filters. And in that video, I think for the first time, had some very legitimate differences of opinion when it comes to canister filters. And so definitely check that out. You'll get a very well-rounded view of canister filters on the Tank Talk podcast. Today on the Smallscape, your channel, what did you talk about?
I talked about some unfortunate events that have either happened or could have happened to a number of my tanks.
Okay.
And I'm sure to others. Maybe to others, some. Otherwise, I just thought I would share some. If you're like, oh, didn't think that would happen, and there you go.
Yep.
Boom.
Yep. So that was today on the Smallscape. Tomorrow we'll have the members video, and then Sunday, of course, we'll have a video out on Primetime Aquatics like we always do. Real quick before we go any further, Leo, thank you so much for the super chat. Best treatment for velvet, is Metroplex? Is Metroplex good? I haven't used that med, so I don't know. But velvet, to me, a lot of the meds that treat ick will also treat velvet. So go-tos, ICX, Copper Safe, those are the ones that I trust for that the most. So that's how I roll with said treatments. And then also want to say thank you to Leslie for being a member of the Prime Timer the last 1 year. It's your 1 year. That's so awesome. I want to thank Joanna for turning me onto green neon tetras. I had no idea how beautiful they are, and they are wonderful with my betta. Very cool. Yep, that's it's a wonderful fish. Very cool. Thank you. Appreciate you being around here for the last 1 year / 12 months. So other things, where we're going to be, where are we going to be? Where's our next thing? Nowhere? Well, we're here right now. Well, what's the thing? What's the next big thing coming up?
Aquashella.
I was going to say, have you forgotten
But it's
already?
like next month, so, it's not like...
Next month, but yes, that's true. But
it's less than 1 month, though.
This weekend will be 3 weeks-ish, because it's like the third weekend in May.
3. Well, 3 because of the weekend.
Yeah, so Third weekend in May, Aquashella Dallas. Be there if you can. It's going to be awesome. That's the May 18th and 19th. And the next one, for those of you who, some people have asked, hey, are they coming back to Chicago? Yes, we are going to be back. Aquashella is going to be back in Chicago, same place, the Schaumburg Convention Center. I think that's what it's called, although I don't know if that's exactly what it's called. But it's the first weekend in August, so I believe it's like August, I don't know, somewhere around 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever that first, I'm pretty sure it's like the 3rd and the 4th of August. We will be back in Chicago, which is really nice for us because it's only about a 30-minute drive, depending on traffic. So it's very convenient, which is cool.
The quad we don't have until fall?
Yes, that is true. So no swaps in May because we'll be at Aquashella. And then we have Greenwater in June and August. And then the quads and the GCCAs will start back up in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah. So we got a little bit of a downtime there unless you are a Greenwater Aquarius Society swap enthusiast. That's where we're going to be in the summertime. Mm-hmm. So guess who's here? Melanie's here. Hi, so great to see everyone. It's been tough not seeing y'all. Well, glad you're hanging out with us. Glad you're here.
Are you going to be in Dallas along with us and second floor?
Just going to ask the same
in
question.
Company?
Dallas, or are you doing Chicago Aquashella? Mm-hmm. That's closer for you, I know. So hope to see you at one of them, at least. That would be pretty cool. Oh, my goodness gracious me. What do we got going on here? We've got the Mars in the house, and you know what the Mars is doing?
Oh, no.
Mars is doing what the Mars does. Thank you so much for gifting the 5 Primetime Aquatics memberships. Really appreciate it every single time. So thank you. And hopefully everybody appreciates it, too. You get to hang out with the Prime Timers on Thursday. It's going to be cool. House of Glasses. Are you going to Keystone Clash again in October? No, unfortunately, we're not. That time gets really, really busy. So I don't think we'll be making it to Keystone this October. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times with the Keystone Clash and the
OCA?
OCA. Thank you for being on your game. The Ohio Cichlid Association Extravaganza.
I always want to go.
In November is they start clashing with the Aquashellas because Aquashella Daytona is in November, and then there's a whole bunch of swaps, and so it gets really, really hard to coordinate those things in the fall once you have the Aquashella and the swap season just on full blast. So and Melanie says, I don't think I'll be in Dallas, Chicago for sure. Oh. Very cool. That will be awesome.
Good.
I'll be in Chicago this weekend for a Blackwater demo talk with Caps. Very cool. That's awesome.
Good for you.
Okay, so so that's where we're going to be. That's the next big thing that's going to be happening in our travel / where we're going to be plans. So what we're talking about today, and I'm not going to waste a whole bunch of time before we get into the actual subject. What we're talking about today is whether or not people should rescue fish. Right? And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. So I'm going to talk about the 2 main concepts first in terms of rescuing fish and what that means, because I think for a lot of us, it might default to one area. And even for me, sometimes I think about it in just one way, but there's actually a couple different ways that you could potentially rescue fish. So you could do something like what Ohio Fish Rescue does, and they go out and they rescue fish from people who can no longer keep them appropriately, right? They focus on big monster fish. They've got massive tanks and huge in-ground pools and in ways to house even the largest fish that you would keep, like arapaima and stuff like that, and keep them appropriately. So there's that way. Now, I don't know if there would be a lot of counter argument against doing that, right? So could
as long as you have appropriate size tanks for appropriate.
Yes, fish. And that is absolutely true. And I've seen people who want to rescue fish from other fish keepers who can either no longer care for their fish or their fish have outgrown their current aquariums. But then I've also seen when people do that from time to time, I've seen them maybe not be able to care for the fish appropriately as well, where I think their heart is in the right place, but then they get these fish that are maybe on the larger side, and they're like, well, they're in a slightly better situation, but still not appropriate long term, and that can be a little bit challenging, right? When you see people who are rescuing fish and they're still not putting them in the appropriate size aquarium and things like that. So what I would say is, if you are someone who wants to fill that role, which I think is needed, unfortunately it's needed, right? I mean, in the ideal world, there shouldn't be any fish rescue, right? I mean, in the ideal world, everybody would have fish, do an awesome amount of research, understand their care requirements, understand what is needed, and be able to care for the fish long term. But that's a perfect world, and there's a lot of reasons why people might need to take fish from other fish keepers. Maybe they're getting out of the hobby, right? Maybe they've had a health issue. Maybe they had a situation where they lose a job, or they had to move and now they can no longer care for the fish the way that they did. And maybe they cared for those fish for years and years and years, and just stuff happens, right? And so absolutely, there's always going to be the stuff happens need for people to rescue fish. And I think that's an important thing. And I think it's something that for people who are doing it, that can be pretty special, because sometimes people are rescuing fish that they might not even want necessarily, right? It's not like on your bucket list of fish that, oh yes, what I need now is my 5th common pleco, because I don't want them dumping it into the waterways. I saw somebody in the chat kind of scrolled up, but somebody rescued 2, I think it was
past it.
Yeah. Anthony said, I rescued 2 common plecos. They're small, but they're only in a 55. Yeah. So,
And Anthony, your winnings from last week just went out today, because I forgot. I didn't even forget and remember. I just forgot until today, and it's like, so just so you know.
Yep. And Flip has all the stuff too, so it's on its way. But yeah, I forgot what I was saying.
I'm sorry.
Thanks a lot for that.
You're welcome.
So anyway, there's that side of it, and I don't think there's a lot of counter argument for people who are doing that. That is a very awesome thing. Yeah, so people sometimes have to rescue fish they might not necessarily want, or it's not as exciting when you are rescuing your 5th common pleco and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this thing? I've got tanks, but holy cow, I'm running out of space. I think the area I want to spend some time on tonight is what I see more commonly as the rescuing fish from pet stores. Okay, so this is a little bit different, and this one I have thoughts about, and I understand, right? So I understand the thought process. So if you were rescuing a fish from a pet store, yes or no? And why?
It could be yes, it could be no. It depends.
Well, tell me your yes reason.
Well, like a yes example.
Yes.
A tank that has nobody else in it. It's like basically all ready to go, or very easy to set up, that I happen to have, and I happen to walk into the Petco or the PetSmart, and I lock eyes with a betta, and I say, oh my gosh, it's a little baby betta, and boy, it sure doesn't look good. Or it's a king betta in that little cup, and he don't look so good. And I decide, you know what, I'm going to take that one and give him a nice home. But I know that it won't be affecting any other fish. I'm not, if he is got the galloping goopers or something, it won't be passing along to anybody else. And I'm going to, and I feel like I can rehabilitate him, then I would.
Okay. So, and that's usually the I think the heart's in the right place sort of thought, right? There's nothing wrong. So let me be clear here. There's nothing wrong with wanting to give a living thing a better life, right? When you see a fish, in our case, struggling, and you're like, you know what, I can do better with this particular animal, and I can give it a life that it deserves. That is a very altruistic, giving thing to do, right? Now, I'm going to offer a counter argument to that. It doesn't mean that I don't recognize that it's a nice thing to do. It doesn't mean that I don't recognize that it's a good thing to do, in the sense that your heart is filled with giving and in the right place, and compassion.
And I bet you some of those reasons are a reason that would explain why I don't do that, like on a weekly or monthly basis. Okay,
so first thing, if you are rescuing fish from a pet store, most commonly the big box stores, and you see and probably the most common one would be the betta, right? I mean, just as you explained, betta's in a small cup, and it's just kind of laying there, and it's like, holy cow, this thing is really struggling. Especially if you've done it more than once, you're like, hey, I've done this a few times, and I think I kind of know how to get these bettas back on track. And so there is a very nice sense of accomplishment when you do that. And quite frankly, you may very well have saved that fish's life, right? So absolutely, that is all true. Okay. Now, here's my thoughts on that. One, in some ways, I look at it, you could look at it like not necessarily rescuing a fish, but buying a potentially sick fish, right? That ultimately is one way to look at it. Like, okay, you know what? Yes, that fish is hurting, but you've basically just bought a sick fish. And there are some things to consider if and when you do that. And I think the biggest thing is, or one of the main points is, if there are people who see these fish and through their compassion and their caring recognize that the fish is not doing well, and they buy that fish, often they just buy it, right? I mean, I don't know how often the stores, especially like a Petco or PetSmart or the other big box stores, I want to just, it's not exclusive to them. It could be a local fish store. It could be a Pet Supplies Plus. I don't know. But how often are they just giving the fish? Like, oh, here you go. Yeah, this fish is on its last legs. Here, just take it. Probably not happening. And so what happens is when you have a customer base that is buying these fish that are struggling, in some ways that kind of covers up the problems that they have in their management system, their supply chain management, the way that they care for these living things. And it could lead to less than ideal behavior, right? And so that could certainly be one concern is, if you are rescuing these fish, is it going to lead to a bigger problem later on, right? As opposed to, okay, these places that do that, they're going to have to start being a little bit more careful about how they treat their fish, about the quantities of fish, and controlling their inventory, and making sure when their fish come in that they are properly cared for or they're properly treated. So that company very well may still be making a profit off of your empathy and off of your compassion. And that could actually cause a bigger problem later on, because they will just continue to bring in more fish and continue to have the same substandard level of care if that is indeed what they're currently doing. The other thing to consider is you're bringing a sick fish into your tank, into your fish room, into your quarantine process on purpose, right? And I have always said, we've done a live stream about what to look for for fish in a pet store. I've done videos on it. I think we did a Tank Talk podcast on that as well. And I've always said I actively avoid any aquariums where there are fish that appear to be ill. I never, ever, is that true? Yeah, no, I never, well, I'm trying to think back into all of history.
Never, ever.
I've never brought in fish into our fish room if they looked sick, right, on purpose. So it's just not something I am willing to do. I'm not willing to risk, especially when we have when you have a larger number of tanks and you have a bunch of quarantine tanks. I'm not going out, I'm not looking for fish to bring in here that might need treatment, because there is always a risk, right? Every time you bring in a fish that may need treatment, there is a risk that those fish can cause a problem. They can be sick. They could spread disease to other fish, maybe in other quarantine tanks, or maybe it's just that one time you accidentally use a net from your quarantine tank to your regular tank, or a gravel vac, or some type of aquascaping tool, and the next thing you know, now you've got something in another tank because a fish was rescued and it was already showing signs of something, whether it was fin rot or disease, ick, velvet, which was just brought up a little bit earlier, some type of bacterial infection, some type of internal parasite, right? Some of these fish might look bad because they've got something going on in their gut that you can't see. And we're thinking, all right, well, as long as we bring the fish in, we're going to be fine. We'll get them up to temperature and we'll feed them and they'll have a bigger area and cleaner water. But really what the fish was suffering from was some type of internal parasite that didn't really show itself. And then for some of us, maybe we're not quarantining for the 4 weeks that we're supposed to. So we bring in this sick fish and now it spreads, right? And it kind of spreads under the surface, so to speak, for a while until it rears its ugly head later on. One other thing to consider with this subject, and we're going to get to doing a lot of Q&A tonight as well, because I'm not going to spend a ton of time here on this subject.
Geez.
I know. But treating fish costs money, right? So even if you get the fish for free and it does have some type of internal or external parasite, Now you may have to be treating the fish with antibiotics, with antiprotozoals, and that all costs money. And so again, you're bringing in that fish that is going to need some treatment, and that is going to cost additional money. So that free rescue fish that you may be getting because it's sick may actually be one of the most expensive fish you've ever purchased if you are going to properly treat that fish. And sometimes you spend the money, you try to treat the fish, it still doesn't work, but you still introduce that parasite into a quarantine tank or into a potential display tank, and that can be less than ideal at times. So I think the bottom line is when it comes to rescuing fish, when you're rescuing them from other people who can no longer care for them, totally makes a lot of sense. When you're rescuing them from a pet store because they have not been treated properly, at this point, the more effective thing to do, if you want to rescue that fish, that's fine, because, some people, let's face it, they can't walk away from that situation. I understand that. But possibly the more effective thing to do would be write a review on the pet store if it's really that bad, right? Say, hey, you know what? I walked in there and there was 15 sick fish and they weren't caring for them. And I don't want to say like internet bully, right? That's not what I'm talking about, but make sure that your reviews of pet stores and stuff are appropriate, and make it known. Hey, this pet store was really awesome, or this pet store was not caring for their fish properly, and it was a real big mess. That can have a much larger impact than maybe taking that one or two fish in and then doing all those things I just said. So, any other thoughts about fish rescue?
Well, I would think one thing, if you are going to do a fish rescue and the fish really doesn't look good, I would hope that you would know your skill level, because you could wind up just kind of prolonging the suffering.
That's a great point, right? So if you are somebody who's just can instantly look at a fish and recognize external parasites, or recognize, hey, you know what, this fish might have an internal parasite, I know what I need to do, right? The higher the skill level, the more that can reduce the likelihood of spreading disease in your other tanks. That's absolutely for sure. Maybe it allows you to treat that fish with a medication more appropriately, rather than having to go through like, try this, it didn't work, try this, it didn't work, try this, it didn't work, okay, this one worked, but it was too late. So that kind of thing. So Jareth says, doing a lot of research is really worth it. Absolutely it is, especially if you want to be one of those people who stays out of the situation where you're the one that has to give up the fish because you can no longer care for it due to the size of the fish and the tanks that you have, right? So Jareth is absolutely right. Doing research, we've been, I think that's something we talk about pretty regularly on the channel. I've always said, there's a few things that all successful fish keepers do. One is have patience, right? Have patience with your water parameters, especially when you're first setting up a tank and not overstocking it. Making sure that you don't have ammonia or nitrite. Have patience with your quarantine process. I know it really stinks to keep a fish in a quarantine tank for 4 weeks, but that's going to reduce a lot of problems. And do research, right? And that also takes patience, to do the internet research and try to resist the impulse buys where you're like, you know what, I've got this I don't know, an Oscar, and right now I've only got a 29 gallon, but I'm planning on getting a 125, and then things happen, and the next thing you know, that 125 never happens, and maybe you get a 55, but that's not nearly big enough for an Oscar long term, and now you're like, what am I going to do with this fish, right? So that it happens a lot, and I know Whip is here. He keeps a lot of larger fish, and he keeps a lot of larger fish in very large tanks, and I'm sure he'd be the first one to tell you, yeah, these fish, some of these South and Central American fish grow really fast. Oscars are extremely fast growers. The fastest growing fish I've ever had was my Nile tilapia. That thing went from maybe 1.5 inches to 18.5 inches, really
like a week.
Fast. Not quite a week, but it was quick. It really was. Shamu says, the Roseline Sharks, Gold Gourami, Pandagara, and Siamese alligator I rescued from some guy with a 46-gallon bow front 2 months ago are very outgoing and no longer skittish now that they're in a 8-foot 240. I love it. That is a massive tank. You don't need a tank that large, but that's really awesome. I bet that 240 looks cool, and all those fish are really loving all that 8-foot 240. That's awesome. I mean, Roseline Sharks are the biggest fish in that group, and they're going to max out right around 6 inches or so. But yeah, in a 46-gallon bow front, probably not a great stocking for that necessarily. I mean, it's not horrible in a 46, but yeah, I depending on how many there were, that could be a little bit of a cramped situation. So glad you're able to do that. Look who's here. Jay Oliver's here hanging out. Hey, Fish Fam. Hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy. Hey, dude, John, are you going to be at Aquashella Dallas? I know that's kind of right in your neighborhood over there. So hoping to see you there. I know that you do some work there as well. So he's a hardworking dude.
Yeah, we're going to see Noel there too.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Very cool.
Yay.
Metasaurus says, have either of you kept keyhole cichlids? My 75 is done cycling, and I wanted to try a group of 4 or 5 keyhole with some ember tetras and cories. I've heard keyhole are super peaceful. Yes, we had keyhole cichlids in a 29 gallon for a while. We had them we moved that group to a 75 gallon, and I would agree with you. Very peaceful fish, very personable fish. I think sometimes they're underappreciated because a lot of times you see them as kind of like a tannish color, and some people don't realize that as they grow older and especially the males, as they really start to kind of come into their own, they actually show a lot of nice pinkish blue. Like it's not like bam in your face like an Mbuna, but it's really pretty. And that would be, I'm pausing long term to ember tetras with the keyholes. Keyholes are peaceful, but I wonder
how big their mouths get.
Well, they don't get the keyhole cichlid. The mouth isn't very large, and again, they're not aggressive. But I wonder. I'd probably want to make sure my embers were full sized by the time the keyholes get full size, knowing that the keyholes are going to grow faster than the embers, just to reduce the likelihood that there's any issues. There probably won't be, but you just never know for sure. Like if the embers were really small and the keyholes were like, hey, I'm 3/4 the size I'm going to get when I'm full grown, you might see some embers go missing. But both full grown, probably okay.
S. Martin said keyholes are super chill and got 4 green water.
Nice. Yep. They are. They are a very chill out fish. They're right up there with keyhole cichlids. And then what was the other one that we kept with them? Curviceps. Curviceps are also really cool. Like them both.
Jay Oliver says he'll be in Dallas for Aquashella the Thursday before for setup and working the raffle booth over the weekend.
Nice.
Sweet.
Very cool.
See you then.
Evan says, someone is bringing a 5-inch flower horn to my swap for $25. What tank size would I need? At that size of fish, I plan to get a 75 long term, but it'll take a few weeks to get there. That's fine. A few weeks is not a big deal. A flower horn doesn't grow that fast. 5-inch, keep it in a 29 gallon. If you're talking about a few weeks, that's not a big deal. I mean, that's a perfectly appropriate quarantine size tank. If I had a 5-inch flower horn, could I keep it in even a 20 for just a few weeks, just through the quarantine process? Absolutely. And then 75 gallon for a single flower horn. You won't be able to keep anything else in the tank, which it almost doesn't matter if it was a 125. The situation would be the same. So, but a 75 is good for a single flower horn. That's going to be awesome. What you got?
Jamie says, I've made a scene in pet stores. Then I was just embarrassed. I don't recommend that.
Was it these fish are not being kept properly seen?
Was it a screaming on top of a table?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Ryder says, hey guys, love the videos. Are dwarf or honey gourami good with angelfish? Also, will angelfish eat shrimp? I've seen many of your videos, but I'm still in doubt. Thank you. Well, thanks for watching all our videos. Dwarf or honey gourami good with angelfish? I think you're going to have better luck with the honey gourami. I have seen dwarf gouramis, believe it or not, bully angelfish, especially when they are less than full grown. I'm not saying that's going to happen, and I'm sure some of you have kept those combos together and be like, no, it's fine. Part of it depends on the size of the tank. So for me, for the angelfish, I want a minimum really of a 55 gallon. Larger is better. Angelfish absolutely will eat shrimp. They are cichlids, and so will dwarf gouramis, by the way. So even the honey gouramis would definitely eat the shrimplets. Dwarf gouramis will eat shrimp. Angelfish will definitely eat shrimp. Will they go after full-grown shrimp if they are juveniles? No. Adults, remember, adults get pretty large, so absolutely they will hunt down your shrimp and pick them off one by one, but so would the dwarf gouramis. So I would go honeys, and you can do lots of honey gouramis, depending on the size of your tank, of course, but yeah, honey and angel I would probably trust a little bit more. And there's always a chance the angelfish could go after the honey gouramis, especially if you get more than one angel and they start to pair up. What you got? Anything? Something?
No, but you know what? Oh, Debbie wants to know she saw balloon rams at her local big box store today. Beautiful fish. What is your opinion on them?
So I don't really have a strong opinion on them because you got balloon mollies, you've got balloon platies, you've got balloon rams, you've got all these different fish that are basically more bulbous, more plump than
Balloon-like.
the balloon-like. Yeah, they were. In my mind, I can't get over. They worry me because they always look like they have like bloat, right? I don't know. It's just me. That is a me thing. I haven't kept enough of them to say whether or not they are less healthy or, what their lifespan is compared to the regular ones. For those of you who have kept balloon, especially balloon rams, if you can speak to, hey, they were just as healthy, they were just as vibrant, they lasted just as long, lifespan wise. I don't know. I stay away from them just because, like I said, to me, in my mind, it's like, oh my gosh, they're bloating. And I know that's not what's happening, but I just can't get over that.
I know.
Yeah. So either that or they've been spending too much time drinking the suds. And they're like, uh-oh. Yeah.
Waddling home.
Picking their belly button like, hey, everybody, just had a 6-pack and been doing that every day for a long time. And look what happened to my belly.
Nice Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Which Beetlejuice 2 is coming out this fall, I think.
Beetlejuice 2. That might be worth
Just
watching.
an FYI.
Yeah, that might be worth watching.
Yeah.
Relina says, I have 10 green neons, 5 gold tetras, 5 neons, and I never see them. What can I do to get them to come out? Flick them. No, all right, don't flick your fish. That would be a horrible thing to do. Yeah, just give them a little spanking. All right. So, 10 green neons. Yeah, I could see that. 5 gold tetras, 5 neons. And if one group is hiding, chances are they're all going to hide. So there's a couple things that you can do. One, you could, depending on the size of your aquarium, if you can add more, sometimes adding more will actually make them feel more comfortable. You've got a good group there, so I don't want to imply that you don't have enough. In a 20-gallon, I don't think I would add any more. If you had like a 40 or a 55, you could double those numbers depending on what else is in your tank, as long as it's not overcrowded. That can help. What else would you do?
Well, I'd add, I'm trying to think because my group, my beloved group of green neons that were in my 20, and I mean, besides adding more, I would add like, what other fish could you add to like bring them?
Well, and again, part of this depends on the types of fish that you enjoy. You've got a theme going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got the gold tetras in there too. So out of those, the gold tetras sometimes can be a little bit more fin nippy than the neons and the greens and the standards. But I do like the idea of adding something that is just going to be totally oblivious to its surroundings. And so things like platies, endlers, I'm a little hesitant to say guppies because I think the males might get their fins. There's a potential there for a little bit of fin nipping to go on, where the platies don't have those super long fins. So platies, endlers, generally speaking, don't have super long fins. They're ornate, but not as like fantail as the guppies are.
What about something like CPDs?
No, because they have a tendency to be just as, if not even more, reclusive than the fish there. So
Really?
Yeah, for sure. I would maybe if you did some maybe like a honey gourami. Again, they're going to be a little bit more inquisitive. But I like the idea of having something a little bit more energetic, like an endler or a platy, something that's just going to be out there and just swimming around constantly looking for food, teaching
Danios.
those fish. Yes, actually, that might not be a bad idea. All right, so some type of a Daniel. I mean, if you don't want to do the standard Daniel, like the leopard Daniels or something like that, that's actually not a bad idea.
I find the honey gourami way more shy, at least mine were, than the CPDs. The
Okay.
CPDs were swimming all around loving life with my green neons. And the honey gourami was hiding behind a Ludwigia or something.
So yeah, I mean, actually, the Daniel's not a bad choice. Yeah, so that's kind of what I would. But I think the platies and or the endlers might also be something that could work. All right, hold on.
Ooh, what's Tinwinny Danios from Aquazen?
I don't know.
What are those? Oh,
I'm
look.
not sure what that
I don't
is.
know what it is, but lately I've just had a thing since what was the store that we saw with Melanie? Art of Aquaria. They had a tank of a whole bunch of different Danios,
they
and
did.
ever since then, I I just love the Danios. I don't know.
We
why.
have, what's crazy, have you seen it? This is how we talk, so just, you're getting some insider talk between the two of us.
Mhm.
In the bottom right 20 by the 10s,
Yeah.
did you see what's in there?
Danios.
No. The tank is emptied out. The bottom right 20 long by the 10s, by the sink.
Oh.
There is a fish that's this big. It is red, and I mean dark red. I don't know what it is because the last fish we had in that tank might have been the rummy nose rasbora, and is absolutely not a rummy nose rasbora that I can tell. But there's a little tiny baby in there. And then, what was the other one that we have going on? There's something else. Oh, then we've got these mystery fish, and I don't know what they are. They're in their middle 20 under the stairs.
Yeah. I thought those were Danios.
No.
There are
one.
some.
No, one might be.
Okay.
Those other ones, I have no idea what they are. There's like 4 fish in there.
How exciting.
And I really don't know what's happening now. Is they, as little babies, they were silver, and I cannot identify these for the life of me. Maybe tomorrow I will show them maybe some of you prime timers can help me out. But then right near their tail on the bottom, they're starting to turn just a wee bit orange. But they're definitely, those ones aren't Danios. That one that was a little bit more aggressive, that was kind of, bopping around the tank, that one looks like a baby giant Danio.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, you'll get some of this, you get fish in.
Bonus.
Like, I've got 500 Galaxy Rasboras and these 5 fish that
And
I
him.
can't identify. We still have, behind our hot water heater tanks, in the quarantine tanks there, we have some Goodeids that I still have to figure out. I know what they are. I didn't know
Behind the
what they
hot
are.
water heater?
Yeah, in the
Oh, I
Siamese
never.
algae
I don't
tank. There's
go.
like 4
I
of
don't
them
go
back
back there
there.
if I don't have to.
So I was thinking about pulling those out and putting them somewhere because they're actually really pretty now.
Look at-
What are the Goodeids that have the yellow, like the yellowish and the blue?
Look at the tin Winnie.
Oh, that's pretty.
Danio.
It's kind of like a leopard-ish type
It's like
Danio.
a leopard Danny. Can you see that? It's beautiful.
Very cool. Shamu says, will Bosemani rainbow fish, roseline sharks, Siamese alligators, pandagoras, a rainbow shark, Congo tetras, and programmies eat shrimp? Absolutely. So let's see. Programmies will definitely eat your shrimplets. They like to explore. Rainbow sharks would absolutely love shrimplets. So would Siamese algae eaters full grown. Roseline sharks will probably pick off all of the above. Bosemani shrimp will definitely eat anything juvenile down to shrimplet. Congo tetras will as well. Pandagoras maybe not so much, but yeah, pretty much everything else in there will pick off juveniles and below. You might get to a point, I know a lot of these fish have smaller mouths, but I wouldn't put it past the roseline sharks full grown to just pick off the adults too when they get hungry, because they are constantly kind of exploring as well on that lower part of the tank. So I would think so. Okay, let me see here. Jamie says, did you see Beetlejuice on Broadway? That really happened. I did not see that.
I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, what happened to my head? Hey.
A lot of the original cast is coming back.
Yeah, that's kind of cool because a lot of times they don't do that. And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, is this really a part 2? And half of them are not even there. But this one, it seems like they've done a good job.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, hold on. Where was the... Another says, hello there, I love platies and Danios. Yeah, cool fish. Platies are extremely colorful. Danios are very, very active, which is kind of nice. Jamie says, I had a dwarf gourami. Do they have failure to thrive, or is it not true? Dwarf gouramis can have some health issues. Yep, they have their own diseases, the wasting disease and stuff, which can make them problematic at times. I've had decent luck with dwarf gouramis. I wouldn't say that I've had, an overwhelming amount of problems with them. Usually, I wouldn't say they live as long as like the golds, the blues, the opalines, like those standard gouramis. Those for us almost always give us 5+ years. The dwarf gouramis, they don't live as long. Usually, maybe 2 or 3 years, but the standard gouramis, very, very long time. Brady says, in my beta sorority, the male CPDs I got as the distractor school are more aggressive than the betas. Yeah. So one of the ways to deal with that, especially if you're worried about the CPDs being aggressive towards the betas, give them a little bit more food more often. I'm not saying overfeed, but just more frequent feedings throughout the day, and especially live baby brine, if you like to hatch that out, that can sometimes keep their bellies a little bit full, keep them a little bit more content. I mean, think about it in some ways in terms of humans. I don't want to anthropomorphize our fish, but when we're full, we just had a meal, we're like, you don't want to do much. You're just kind of hanging around, you're content. You've got your belly full of food, and you're not as aggressive. And that can also be the same thing with fish, where if you feed them a little bit more often, smaller meals more often, they're not quite as likely to go after other fish. Oh, here's a good one. OG Barry says, Scarlet Baddest tank mates, having trouble finding anything detailing them. Scarlet Baddest, for those of you who don't know, very, very,
Adorable.
very tiny fish, going to max out at about 1 inch. They basically behave like mini 1-inch cichlids. Tank mates.
They look like them too.
You've got a lot of options. You've actually got a lot of options there. I think any Rasbora would work just fine. I can't think of a single Rasbora I wouldn't put with Scarlet Baddest because they're about the same size. So you've got your Galaxy Rasboras, your Emerald Dwarf Rasboras, Green Kubitai. What else? Small tetras, Ember tetras would
you
work.
put
All
like
your neon types would work.
Mira chilies that small or no?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah?
Miras, chilies, Dwarf Rasbora,
Actually, that would be a really fun tank.
red lines, even the brilliant greens.
That'd be a really fun
Because
tank to do.
It would be. The Scarlet Baddest, they can be aggressive towards one another sometimes, but they more or less, at least when we've kept them, they kind of ignored other fish. Keep in mind, though, with the Scarlet Baddest, I never got them to eat prepared, like the processed foods, right? So flakes and pellets. What's nice is all those other fish, too, they would eat live baby brine and stuff like that. So if you're going to do Scarlet Baddest, just know that it's probably best to hatch out a couple batches, a batch of live baby brine in the morning and at night, and do it that way. I just think it's easiest that way. Ooh, new friends. What top or mid-level fish would you choose for a planted 60-gallon green fire tetras? Bristlenose pleckles, that's cool.
Oh, yeah.
Pandacories, mystery snails. Top mid-level fish for a 60-gallon planted. So you got a nice sized tank there. You got a ton of options. We don't have to worry about the mystery snails, but no shrimp. We have to have plant safe. So I'm going to say any of the dwarf type. So you've got the dwarf rainbow, the silver one, but any of the dwarf type rainbows, and so that would be your Gertrudii, Pascae, Furcata, thread fins, Celebes. Those are all cool, mid-ish to top water, depending on where the other fish are inhabiting. All plant safe. They're small, so they kind of fit in with the other sizes. What else? Brilliant green Rasboras, red line Rasbora. What else would we do? Mid-level.
I think you named all the ones that I would have.
Yeah.
Lamp ice?
The other thing, too, is you've got your hatchet fish. So you've got the marble and the silver hatchet fish. Those would be very top water. You also have all of your half beaks. Your half beaks would definitely be top water fish, which would be really cool as well. So, and less common, right? The hatchet fish and the half beaks are far less common, but really, really cool inhabitants.
I have to go.
Already? Holy cow. My gosh, this went by really fast. So she's got to go do her
I have to do my
evening
pickup.
pickup. But don't you worry, I'm still going to be here, and we're still going to be answering questions because that's how we roll.
Regina says she's so excited for the new Beetlejuice.
Yep, it's going to be awesome. There's one movie that I don't get excited for movies anymore. I haven't been excited since Endgame, Marvel Endgame. Really, that was the last movie I wanted to see. But the Bike Riders coming out in June.
Yeah.
That's the movie I want to see.
Yeah.
So we're all gonna. Yep, it's gonna be awesome. Okay, peace out.
I'm gonna go now. Everybody have a great night. And
I'm scooching, you're scooching. I'm turning off your mic, right? So stop talking.
Okay, bye.
Off your mic goes on my mic. Oops, sorry. Okay, scooching, doing the scooch. Got to get all situated here. Nope, this way. Okay, let me move all my other stuff over and my other stuff. Okay, so Charles says, how do I safely lower my nitrate level in my 55-gallon? Water change. That's going to be the quickest. And if it's really high, don't be afraid to, provided that your water parameters are stable and The only thing that's going to drastically change when you do this big water change is the nitrate, and not like pH or water hardness or anything. But I'm not at all afraid to do a 75% water change in a tank if my nitrate levels are too high. And then long term, if you wanted to add some plants, that would be a great way to help regulate that long term. So you've got the aquatic plants. If you've got fish that will eat plants, sometimes pothos roots, like to put the stem in the water, let the roots grow down and the leaves on top of the tank so they're getting light from the tank light. That can also be a really big help. Okay, let me see here. Yep, everybody's saying water changes. Noel says, did you guys plan your shirt theme tonight? No, the minute we sat down, I looked at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're wearing a Harley shirt. I'm like, often I will change for the live stream, but I'm like, you know what? I like this shirt. It's the Cajun Harley Davidson. It's got the little lobster guy. We went there because sometimes we'll stop at some of the Harley dealers on the way to and from an Aquashella. We like to drive to these things. And we took a very roundabout way because a couple years ago we went to the Dallas Aquashella, but then we stayed an extra like 3 or 4 days in Galveston, just kind of on the coast there. And then from there, I'm like, hey, let's just kind of go down to Louisiana. We were actually going to go all the way down to New Orleans, but it was probably one of the worst storms I've ever seen. And we were supposed to, were we supposed to go all the way home that day? I don't remember. There was a hotel maybe in Tennessee, but I'm like, man, we got to turn around. So we didn't make it that far south to New Orleans, but we made it to Cajun Harley Davidson and got this cool shirt. So yeah, when you're driving an extra 2 hours out of the way just to go get a shirt, that's my life. That's our lives. It's kind of crazy. Crazy. Sad but true, man. Sad but true. Long time ago, me and my buddies, we still talk about this. We were at the gym and there was these 2 dudes working out, and one of them was doing lat pull downs. And the other guy was trying to get his gym partner all like, hyped up for his heavy set on his, lat pull downs. And he's screaming because Metallica was like, sad but true, man. Sad but true. Come on, you can do it. Like that was supposed to motivate him. I was like, usually screaming sad but true in your ear while you're trying to do a set is not the most motivating thing. Like, wow, you're calling me sad but true. Mark says, I bought 3 yellow lab cichlids from PetSmart for $7 each, yet the local OSA aquarium fish store is charging $20 each for their smallest size. Why is the markup so much more at those places? That's a great question. The price differences can be dramatic depending on where you go, even in the same market. We have pet stores by us where I would say the fish prices border on insane. And I mean, they're just, especially peacock cichlids, it's not uncommon to see non-colored up. So basically males that have no color, silver, tan, juveniles, 40, 50, 60 bucks a piece. And I'm thinking, holy cow, retail those things maybe are 20 bucks. Swaps, you can get an entire bag of them for like 10 bucks, right? Just have a little bit of patience. And for 10 bucks, you can buy a half a dozen of these same cichlid. They're not colored up either, but they're a little bit smaller than the ones. So it can vary dramatically. $20 for a yellow lab that is on the smaller side is an insane amount of money to me. I would never, ever, ever pay that, but I'm also spoiled. I fully recognize that. The tank that is right there, that's 75 gallon. I have, I think 23 fish in there. Half a dozen of them are Celosi. The rest of them are yellow labs. I think the average cost to me, because it was a swap, was like $2 a piece. And they were, I mean, if you look at them, they're at least 2.5 inches when I bought them. Maybe some of them closer to 3 inches. And I think I pay, on average, it was like $2 or so a piece. So I get really spoiled with the swaps. And I recognize because of that, sometimes it's hard for me to look at some of the prices and be like, wow, that's a great deal. $7 isn't a bad, retail is not bad. Keep in mind, you can't blame local fish stores for charging retail prices. They have to. They have overhead, right? They've got a building. They've got energy bills. They've got employees. They've got insurance. They've got all these things that they have to do. So they have to charge something more than what you're going to find at a swap, a lot more, because they've got to be able to cover their overhead as part of the convenience of being able to go to a pet store and buying fish basically when you walk in the door. And the other thing too is if the local fish store has a lot lower likelihood of selling you sick fish, then there is going to be a premium to that I don't mind paying. If the fish were larger, that would matter. But if they're the same size, yeah, $20 is a lot of money. I mean, I know part of it is again, it's market dependent. If you're walking into a pet store that has a whole bunch of display tanks and these big ornate, massive, here's my 800-gallon tank and here's a 1,000-gallon tank, and all that goes into running that, there could be a lot more overhead there, and so they have to cover those costs. But for me personally, am I paying $20 for a yellow lab? Absolutely, positively not a chance in the world. Even a full-grown one, I wouldn't pay that much. Because I don't mind, also, again, I've got patience. I don't mind buying juveniles that are just an inch and a half, and watching them grow up. If anybody's been watching the channel for a long time, that's what I do. All right, I don't mind going to a swap. I don't mind going to a fish meeting and getting the juveniles from a breeder awards program and just having a little bit of patience. And then it's really cool too, because you get to watch the fish grow up from basically being a baby. And there's something so rewarding for those of you who have done it, especially if you've bred fish and you've kept some of them. It's like, okay, I remember when these fish were babies, and you watch them start to grow up as little juveniles, and they're starting to figure things out, and the community dynamics are starting to work. And then all of a sudden you get these glorious fish that become kind of like the tank boss, and they're in their prime. They've got wonderful color. They themselves they're breeding. And then, you watch them kind of go from that to, okay, I can no longer hold tank boss status. And so they kind of retreat a little bit. And then, of course, the sad part is after a number of years, they go to fish heaven. But that is very rewarding. So even if I could buy a lot of the fish that are full grown and get a decent deal, I often don't, because I don't want to miss that full life change that happens. All right, so I have a 4.2 planted aquarium, with 25 cardinals and 8 glass fish. What should I put? So 4.2 gallons. If it's 4.2, I would probably remove all. To be honest, I'd probably remove almost all those fish, because that's a lot. 4.2 gallon. There's not much I put in a tank under 5 gallons. Maybe a betta and a mystery snail. If they were small rasboras, I did a YouTube short one time where I had like 10 chili rasboras, but they get not like 3/4 of an inch max size, a really skinny fish. If it was a 42 gallon, then yeah, you've got some space there with 25 cardinals and 8 glass cats. Then you might be looking for like some apistogramma, or maybe a group of honey grammies or something like that. But a 4.2 gallon, that would be a really tough thing, because those fish are going to run out of space real quick. Cardinal tetras can get to be a couple inches, and 25 of them would be a lot to have in a tank that size. Okay, let's see here. 3G says, Brett, do you follow Father Fish? I showed a puffer on his show just before these two. Okay, that's a conversation. Don't mean to butt in, sorry. Melanie says, I had bad luck with farm-raised dwarf, but not my wild dwarf grammies. Well, and you also do an insanely good job of matching water parameters, too, for a lot of those fish that, like the dwarf grammies, like your chocolates and all that stuff. You've got the perfect setup for those fish. And by the way, for those of you who want to know what I'm talking about, I did a fish room tour of Melanie's fish room. I don't know, Melanie, when was it? Maybe like a year and a half ago. And it is even more impressive in person than it was, and it's going to come through in video, but check it out if you haven't, because it was one of my all-time favorite fish room tours that I've ever done. So it was her tank that was featured on the Congo Tetra species profile Congo Tetra species profile that I did. That is one of my favorite tanks that I've seen. So well worth it. But she does an outstanding job of getting those water parameters and the aquascapes to match what those fish would normally see in nature. So cool. Okay, let me see here. I'm scrolling around. Oh, this thing got stuck. That's why it's going crazy. I don't know what is going on here. Aquazen says, what can you tell me about the nutrition of frozen brine? I know it is fibrous, low protein, and generally healthy for fish. Is there anything I'm missing nutritionally? No, I think that's a pretty good summary. I don't necessarily feed frozen brine shrimp as a primary source of nutrition. It is very fibrous, and so that's good. There is some nutrition there. There is certainly some carotenoids and stuff like that that can help a little bit with fish color. But it is something that I personally, I actually don't feed a lot of frozen foods in our fish room or in the gallery anymore. It's been a long time, and maybe that's to my detriment, but I really don't. No frozen bloodworms or brine shrimp. I used to feed more of it. The thing with the frozen brine is you got to be a little bit careful depending on the brand. Sometimes it can leave a lot of almost like oil. Not as bad as, what was the other thing that I fed that one time that was frozen? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking out. But it was like just absolutely, it was just left coats of oil over the top of the tank. Frozen brine doesn't do that. But yeah, it's more of a snack. It's more of something that I might feed. If I'm feeding twice a day and I was putting that in the rotation, fish might see that once or twice a week. That's about what I would do. Okay, let me see. Dave says, the fish dude, hi guys, sorry I'm late. There's got to be a demerit for you. You're going to get a detention. Just kidding. We don't hand out detentions here. Jamie says, I'm pretty sure you've said Beetlejuice 3 times. Say it one more time, Beetlejuice. That was not a very good impression. Usually, it's better. This thing, holy cow, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom here because something seriously happened where this was like freezing up because I was like way up there and I don't know what's going on. Anyone knows about auctions in South Florida? Not South Florida, but I know that the Tampa Bay Aquarium Society, I don't know if that's exactly what it's called, has a pretty decent sized swap. And the meetings, I spoke at the Pasco County where Grant and Shelby are members. And that one, it wasn't just that they had huge auctions. I'm telling you, just their regular meetings where I spoke, there were more bags of fish there than in some auctions I've been to, just like straight up club auctions. It is worth the drive. I mean, I know South Florida to Central Florida is not exactly close, but it's the Pasco County and then the Tampa Bay. I don't know if it's called the Aquarium Society, but those two are absolutely Pasco for sure. I mean, that one I've seen. Very, very much worth it. They're just their regular club meetings have tables upon tables upon tables. I don't remember how long it took them to get through that because I didn't leave or I left before I had a chance to see all this stuff go, but it had to take them a couple of hours to get through all those bags. And it wasn't just fish, it was plants, it was rocks, it was wood, it was everything. It was crazy. Very cool. I don't know if they realize how good they have it. Leland says, need help on stocking ideas for Transcriptus Community 40-gallon breeder tank. So Julidachromis transcriptus is a Lake Tanganyika rock dweller. In fact, we just had some breed. I've got a YouTube short. I think it's coming out tomorrow where I talk about it in the 75-gallon over there. That one. There is a whole group of them by an intake. I don't think they're going to survive because, well, there's a whole mess load of fish in there, including smaller gold compressiceps and a rather large inkfin calvus. We'll see. But I actually saw some fish that are no longer fry that are almost the juvenile state, just a couple of them kind of hanging out in the rocks, and the parents are doing a really good job of keeping other fish out of that corner. So we'll see if they grow. But anyway, stocking ideas, you got a whole bunch for a 40-gallon breeder. Now, again, keep in mind, when you stock this as a community tank, the likelihood that you're going to get fry from any of these fish, or at least a meaningful amount, is going to be reduced. But you've got, just like I mentioned with the 75-gallon, you've got the Calvus cichlid. There's lots of different varieties. They stay smaller than compressiceps, really cool looking fish. You do have the opportunity, depending on how you set it up, you could do some shell dwellers like Maltese or Brevis. You've got the open water swimmers like the Cyprichromis leptosoma, those nice blue fish with the yellow tails. Those are certainly options. You've got options to do other types of rock dwellers like the Ornatus or the Reaganized. So there's definitely some things you could do there. What else could we do? What else do I have in that tank? I've got Bifronatus in there. The Tigra pictilis is another one. So you've definitely got some fish. I mean, most of your Lake Tanganyikans are going to be fine with the exception of Frontosa. In a 40-gallon breeder, I probably would stay away from a lot of the feather fins because some of them get pretty large. So that might be a bigger issue there. But pretty much all the other ones, you're in pretty good shape. Through the Enchanted Portal, thank you so much for becoming a Primate Primetime partner. Really appreciate you being here. Adrian says, I've been losing guppies one at a time. They become skinny and lay on the substrate. Is that a parasite? Probably. Yeah, if they're becoming skinny like that, usually that's some type of parasite. So your options are to do what a lot of people do, and because I would know just by their skinny laying on the substrate, there's a chance it could be fish TB, which is not treatable, which would mean you'd have to basically break down the whole tank and mostly get rid of the substrate, the hardscaping, bleach your filter, let it dry, and then come back to it in a month or so and reset it up. If it's an internal parasite, then my go-tos for those are going to be my Paracleanse and my Expel Peak in combination. So I always run those in combo because that I think tends to work out the best. I never remember which one is which, but one of them is levamisole and one of them is metronidazole. So you mix those two together, and that usually works out pretty well. But again, the skinny part, yeah, that's a tough one. Sound Pitch, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Considering buying a 5 or 6 foot aquarium, any recommendations, big box store or water box? So if you buy from the big box store, you know what you're getting, right? You're getting a tank that is going to usually hold water. It's not going to be the thickest glass in the world. Sometimes the silicone isn't the best job in the world. But I will say, so far, almost every single tank that I've had in here, and the fish room on the other side, when this used to be a fish room, came from Petco or PetSmart. With a very, very, very few exceptions, that's been the case. And I have only had, out of all of those aquariums, one that started to leak. It was a 75 gallon. Yes, it was a pain to break it down, but when I took it back, there were no issues there with getting it exchanged for a new one. Yes, again, the big pain in the butt is, of course, breaking it down, resetting it up. But I didn't have an issue there. But all the rest of the tanks that you see here are basically coming from $1 per gallon, or now it's a 50% sale or whatever sale it is that they're having these days. On the flip side, if you wanted to go with more of a custom manufacturer, the water box, or maybe custom aquariums, or I forget the one that's in Texas, you could do that. Are you going to get a higher quality aquarium? Absolutely. Are you going to spend 3 to 4 times more money? 100% yes. Is that worth it to you for your personal peace of mind over the next however long you're going to keep that tank, 10, 15, 20 years? Maybe it is. For me, again, I don't worry about it as much because here's, the deal is down here. We've had catastrophes happen down here. We've had 40-gallon breeders that basically lost half their water on the floor because the hang-on back filter overflowed out the back. We had the big catastrophe, I don't remember when that was, a year and a half ago, where one of the boys left the sink kind of on, but they left a hose attachment, so it was running through the hose, but they had it off it's hard to explain, but basically they had it off, so the water pressure was building in basically a python hose that eventually split. I have no idea how many gallons of water wound up on the floor, because by the time we got home, half of our fish room had a solid 1.5 to 2 inches of water, and both sumps, we have 2 sump pumps in our basement, they were both running pretty much the whole time. But the bottom line was, it's a fish room, it's a basement, I had tile, I had 2 sump pumps running. While it was horrible, and while we had to clean some stuff up, and we had to get the shop vacs out and put the fans on, after about a 5-hour cleanup, it was mostly fine. So I don't have to worry about, hey, if this thing leaks, am I going to ruin hardwood floors? Is it going to drip down into a sub-level? That being said, I just go with whatever Petco and PetSmart has. I don't have any special hookups or anything like that. So all my 6-foot tanks, the 2 that you see here, came from a Petco. They're Aquion or Marineland or whatever the 2 main types are. Sean, what's up? Thank you so much for the super chat, man. Appreciate it. When you are stocking a fresh community, do you have to quarantine the species separately? Nope. Unless they're aggressive, right? Unless they're really mismatched. And of course, then if they were aggressive, why would you put them in the same display tank, I suppose? But no, if you're going, so here's the deal. You're saying a fresh community. If you've got nothing in the tank, that tank can become your quarantine tank if you really wanted to. So if you're going to just take your fish and throw them all together in a quarantine tank, which you can do, right? If you've got community fish, like, I went out and I got some platies and I got some cories and I got this. There is a risk, okay, if the fish came from different aquariums at the pet store and one of those aquariums had something in it and you combine all those fish together in the same quarantine tank, obviously there's going to be more of a risk that all your fish now have been exposed. So that is something to consider, where if you quarantine them separately, but then you also have to use separate nets, separate gravel vac, so you're not transferring the water from one tank or any potential parasites from one tank to another. There is additional safety there if you quarantine them separately. If you're going to quarantine them all together in your tank, but you've got a new aquarium, new display tank, you could just throw them straight in, because that tank becomes your quarantine tank, because you're going to do the same things in the display tank that you were going to do in the quarantine tank if they were all together. The only downside there is if your display tank is considerably larger than your quarantine tank and you do have to treat with meds, you're going to use a lot more meds, right? So it's the only downside to doing that. Obviously, start slow, because you want to make sure that you don't wind up with a ammonia or nitrite spike. So no matter what, whether it's going into quarantine, whether it's going into a display tank, you got to make sure that the number of fish that you're adding to that aquarium, that the microbes are already there to handle that bioload. Otherwise, you're going to wind up, no matter what you do, in either side of it, you're going to wind up with an ammonia spike that could complicate your quarantine procedure. All right, let's see here. So you're talking about fish TB. So fish TB contagious to humans as well. Not the same species, right? So there is T. marinum, and that is a wound infection, but it's not respiratory TB. So the TB that fish, the tuberculosis that fish have, is usually going to be, that's contagious to us, that gets the wound infections, is a T. marinum. I've actually done videos about that. I can't remember if it was a members video or if I actually did that for, I think it might have been a members video a number of years ago, but yeah. And I think Oink, you had, I think it was you that had that as well, that you shared. But yeah, wound infection, that TB wound infection that you get from fish tanks is nothing to mess around with, because TB, tuberculosis, can I nerd out for a second on the micro side of things? The reason why it's so serious is, one, tuberculosis grows very, very slowly, which sounds like it would be a good thing, except the antimicrobials that are used, like, so the antibiotics that we use to treat bacterial infections work best when the microbes are replicating at a relatively fast rate, because they almost always interfere with some metabolic process. So the more they try to metabolize, the more the antibiotics are actually going to function. So with TB growing so slowly, the drugs that we take, the antibiotics that we would take to kill the TB, don't work quite as well. The other thing that they have is TB has like most microbes have a cell wall, but tuberculosis has this additional coating. It's called mycolic acid. It's this waxy coating over their cell wall, makes it even more difficult to treat, because that mycolic acid actually protects them a little bit from the immune system. It protects them a little bit from the drugs, the antibiotics that we would use. So yeah, it's best. I always tell people, if you've got, and you know, when we did an aquarium safety. If you haven't seen that video, I think it was one of the more important videos that we've ever done. I did a pretty comprehensive aquarium safety guide. And one of the things I said there is, if you ever got cuts on your hands, stay out of your tanks for that week, right? Just let your hands heal. Most likely, for a lot of you who are keeping up with your aquariums, you're not going to need to get in there. You know, you might be able to go an extra week. It's not like your nitrates are already at like 500 parts per million, and 525 is going to kill everything. Well, maybe, but most of us are probably under 100. And trust me, it's better just to let those nitrates go a little higher, let a little bit of algae build, let the tanks look a little bit not as good. Let your hands heal. No wounds on your hands when you're going into tanks, because that can cause all kinds of issues. Okay. Let me see here. Drew says, I keep driving past custom aquariums on the way to Nina. Really need to see if I can get in for a visit one of these days. Yeah, I did a tour there. So if you ever want to see what Custom Aquariums does in Wisconsin, I went up there a long time ago with Kasha from Creative Pet Keeping, and I did a full tour of their manufacturing process. It was pretty interesting. I liked it. They can pretty much build any size tank, but they only build glass tanks. At least when I was up there, that was all they did. They felt very strongly that their manufacturing process lent very well to doing glass only. They weren't doing any acrylics. And you know what's funny? And maybe I'm wrong about this. I would love to hear from you guys, but I don't see the acrylic tanks as predominant on the freshwater side anymore. It seemed like for a while, when you would go to a store that sold fish tanks, there would be some, you'd see some 75 gallon or larger acrylic tanks there. At least in our area, I really don't see it anymore. And I mean, they're expensive. They're considerably more expensive. They scratch a lot easier, but the advantage is you don't have the problems with the leaking quite as much if they were manufactured properly. Aquazen says, I was unaware of catching disease from your tank, even though it makes perfect sense. Oh, yeah, for sure. Pseudomonas is another one that is really difficult to treat that you can catch from an aquarium. So just be careful. Yeah. Evan says, does anyone in the chat have experience making their own tanks? That is a whole nother level of manufacturing. I mean, I don't trust myself. I've thought about it. You see people doing the plywood tanks, and I remember Joey from way back in the day. I watched that video like 5 times of him making his plywood tank, and I'm like, that would be pretty cool. And again, I've got the fish room, the gallery here. It's all in the basement, so if something leaked, it's not the end of the world. But plywood tank, you're talking about, hey, that's 1,000 gallons of water. That is going to cause a problem. If that thing burst on me. So, and I don't trust myself with that kind of thing. I know I'll do some mechanical stuff working on motorcycles and things like that. And I've done some stuff around here, but like as far as building a tank for me, I don't have, I know my limitations, and I would not sleep at night knowing that I just put whatever it is, 800, 1,000 gallons of water into something that I built and hoping that it's going to, remain dry around the tank forever. Sound Pitch says, Tank Talk Podcast upvote, best podcast of the world. Well, thank you so much. John and I have had a lot of fun doing that, the Tank Talk Podcast, because it allows us to talk about things in a conversational way and then just have it be an open-ended conversation. And we can, if it takes an hour, it takes an hour. If it takes an hour and a half, so be it. But you can get into things in a much greater detail than a 15-minute video can do. And the nice thing is it's a conversation, so we can talk about things in much greater depth than you would in a typical video. So Tank Talk Podcast, yeah, those videos come out on Mondays on that channel. New friend says there's a guy with videos making them out of IKEA glass shelves. I don't know much about IKEA glass shelves, but I hope they're thick and of good quality. Dustin says, I got a 125 with a Fluval FX6 established. Got a 2-inch Jack Dempsey and a 2-inch Severum. Wanting to get an Oscar. Any thoughts? Better to grow up together? I think that. I think usually you're going to have less problems with cichlids when they are small and they can figure out the hierarchy from a smaller size. This is not guaranteed because they're cichlids. My guess is going to be your Jack Dempsey is probably going to rule that tank. It is by no means a guarantee. I don't know what type of Severum you have. I have found that the green Severums tend to be the most assertive. I wouldn't necessarily call them aggressive, but certainly the most assertive, where the red shoulders, the golds, the turquoise, not quite as much. And Oscars, to me, are not overly aggressive fish. Again, they're cichlids. You don't know what they're going to do 100%, but in a 125, that's not a horrible stocking. I don't know if I would add any more large cichlids in that tank, but you've certainly got space for some dithers, whether that's like silver dollars or really large rainbow fish, like the ones that get 5 inches so the Oscar doesn't eat them. That could certainly work. But yeah, I would try to get them to grow up together. They're all, the Oscar and the Jack Dempsey are going to grow pretty fast. The Severum won't grow as fast as the other two, but they're not necessarily slow growers. So I think size-wise, if you got them all about the same size, they'd probably be okay. All right, let me see here. Now it says I cut down a 10-gallon into a 5-gallon for my rescue betta. That's cool. More than enough space for a betta. M&C, what's up? I had a 240 that was glass and a 240 that was acrylic. Big weight difference. My 310 was acrylic. Oh, that's absolutely true. Yeah, that's a really good point. The acrylics are not nearly as heavy as the glass. Absolutely true. Shamu says custom aquariums put a 48 by 48 by 4 foot by 4 foot by only 6 inch tall. So basically it's a frag 6 inch tall. I mean, I guess it's like a frag tank. On their Instagram, what would you put in that? Man, 6 inches. So just to give a point of reference, this tank right behind me is a low boy. It's 4 feet long. So you're going to get a tank that's 4 feet long. It's only 24 inches wide, but it's 10 inches tall. And you can see that kind of looks like a squished tank, right? So you've got a tank that is basically that length, but it's a square. So it's going to be just as long, which is cool. That's actually kind of funny. I've been telling custom aquariums forever that they should make, and actually ZooMed too, because ZooMed is the company that makes these things. I'm like, why don't you do an 8-foot tank just like that and put one center brace in the middle? And part of it's the shipping. It would be really hard to ship such a long tank and do it economically. But I wish they would make a 100-gallon lowboy that was twice as long as the one behind me. But anyway, 6 inches is not very much space at all, especially when you consider you're probably going to put substrate in there. You're probably going to want it, especially if you're going to plant it, you're going to want at least 1.5 inches or so of substrate. So now you're down to like 4.5 inches. There's not a whole lot. So if it were me, it would probably, excuse me, it would probably be a nano tank in the sense that nano fish, cory cats, you could do some plecos. You could do pretty much all your rasboras, because 4.5 inches is fine. If you wanted to put a betta in there, that's a lot of surface area. Shell dwellers would probably still work. Those of you who've seen the lowboy on the other side in the fish room, I've got the lowboy shell dweller tank that might work, but again, that's not a lot of space. So, and I almost wonder if the shell dwellers would be more prone to jumping with only a 6-inch tall tank, because they do like to they're a little bit territorial, so they will chase each other around, and sometimes to get away, they'll kind of jump. And shell dwellers are one of the jumpiest fish we have in our fish room. They love to jump. So nothing big. And when I mean big, I don't even think a dwarf gourami would look all that great in a 6-inch tank with only 4.5 inches of actual swimming space. So yeah, you'd be shrimp. Certainly could do shrimp and snails, that kind of thing. An invert tank, maybe crayfish if you wanted to do that. So, and then MSC Serpent Design makes them from. Tanner knows what he's doing. So he's on his game. If he's doing it, I'm sure he's done the research to know that it's going to work just fine. Okay, let me see here. Dustin says it's a turquoise Severum. Yeah, so they're generally not as aggressive as the greens. So probably fit in okay in that tank that you have. Blue Acara tank size, filter, and tank mates. I like a minimum of a 40 breeder for the Blue Acara. The species profile that I did, I believe, was when I showed the fish in the 40-gallon breeder. It was a group of them. They got along pretty well in that tank. But I would want long-term, I think a 40 breeder for one or a pair might work just fine. But if you got a 55-gallon or larger, even better. The filter just totally depends on your tank size. You could you could do whatever hang-on back filter is meant for that particular tank size is going to work just fine. Tank mates, check out the species profile I did. It'll give you a big old list. But again, you got a lot of options. You got your cory cats, you've got your bristlenose and clown plecos for your kind of like your scavenger crew. You have, again, depending on the tank size, you've got rainbow fish, you've got larger types of tetras, and I'm thinking not necessarily neon types because those would possibly get eaten. But if you've got like your mid-size, your Congo tetras, Colombian tetras, let's see, serpes, the little bit of a larger tetra, even lemon tetras might work. So what else would I put in there? I've mixed a lot of electric blue acara with angelfish, with severums before. So you've got a lot of options. Electric blue acara is a great fish, usually not overly aggressive. Oink, thank you very much for posting that. So Oink just posted that aquarium safety video that I did back in the day. That's a really good one. If you want to watch something that is going to be packed full of useful information when it comes to the aquarium hobby, that would definitely be one to spend. And it's not very long. I think it's less than 10 minutes. So I'm usually not a long video type of guy, if you haven't noticed. My students have always told me that when I design my classes, for my hybrids and my online classes, when I do my videos, they are almost always less than 10 minutes. They range from 5 to 10 minutes. Now, a particular subject might take an hour to talk about, but the videos that I create for them are 5 to 10 minute videos, and they can watch that 5 or 10 minute video. They can fill out their study guides and their, take their notes and then go to the next one. It just makes it a little bit easier when you've got information in smaller chunks, because let's face it, we fade, man. Studies have shown time and time and time again, our attention spans are shrinking, and they've never been abnormally long. You've got someone's attention, if you're really interesting and super engaging, you might have their full attention for 20 minutes max. After that, they start to fade. So 5 to 10 minutes is a sweet spot where most people can be engaged for that long most of the time, especially adults. Younger ones, their minds are just naturally built to wander a little bit. People think that that's unusual. It's actually not. Shelly asks, Jason, how do you like the Oaza filters? I love them. So we've got the 125s right behind me. We have the Biomaster 850 thermals. So in those two tanks, and then the low boy right behind me there is got the same thing. It's got the Biomaster thermal, but it's the 350. They've been running great. I haven't cleaned them yet. In fact, I keep saying this, and see, this is the problem with me and canister filters. I knew this going in. I don't want to clean them. Now, the nice thing about the Oaza is that they have that pre-filter thing that you can clean. The only problem is if where you're putting them, if you don't have the clearance to pull that thing out, well, guess what? You got to take the filter out anyway. So I'm going to have to do that no matter what, because those things have been running for a while. So they're all going to be maintenanced either this weekend or next. So it depends on when I stop being lazy. But I really don't want to be that guy who does a video in 6 months, be like, I haven't cleaned this in over a year. Let's go take a look. And it's just like, dude, you should have been cleaning that. But it's nice because with canister filters, generally, well, with any filter really, if one of the ways you know that it really needs to be cleaned is when the water is not crystal clear, because especially with a canister filter, because when you're packing it full of sponge and filter floss, if it's not catching that stuff, it's time. And as of right now, I would say that they're still doing a good job. They're still the water's still pretty darn clear. All right, let me see here. Hold on. Where? See, this thing gets really all messed up. I'm like way behind in the chat. Well, says, seriously though, anyone know if Zen... Are we talking about Zen Aqua? Is that what we're talking about? I haven't... they used to post on Instagram all the time. Yeah, I haven't seen them in a while. I know one of the brothers, I thought I saw on Instagram that... Or the Zen Ginger. Which one are we talking about here? I don't know. That's when it happens when you come in halfway through a conversation, not knowing what's going on. Michelle says, thoughts on diamond tetras with electric blue Acara and gold serum? Love it. That would be a cool combination. And a 75 gallon, that would be very cool. Diamond tetras have a little bit of a propensity to fin up a little bit, but they're not going to most likely mess with electric blue Acara or a serum. So I think that could be a wonderfully cool mix. I love diamond tetras. I was actually going to bring them into the fish room, and I thought that's what I ordered, but I wound up with the diamond head neons, which was actually a really cool mistake because they wound up being awesome fish, and they are in this tank over here, the nano tank. There's a whole bunch of them. All right, let me see here. Joanna says, you sure aren't a long video guy. Nope. I try to, and again, I don't necessarily, the videos take as long as the videos need to take for me, but I'm not going to stretch them out or anything like that. And they are as long as I need them to be, but I try, if there was a subject that was going to take me 20, 30, 40 minutes to explain, maybe I would put out a video that long. I mean, I've done a few, like when I was talking with the Scott from APET, where that was a conversation that just flowed, and that was like a 30-something minute video, but that was like one of the longer videos I've put out that wasn't a fish, even the fish room tours, right? So people kind of, especially there's been a couple where it's like, hey, there's a 5-part fish room tour, because I could have done it all in one, and that would have been like over an hour. So I decided, let me just make multiple parts. Even the fish room tours, I've done 2-part ones, and even those get a little bit long, like 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is a long video. And I guess part of it is just the way that I like to consume stuff. And that is I talked about this last week, most everything I do, I play on like at least 1.5 times. And if it's a really long video, then it's like, all right, if this is a long video, I have to have a long period of time set aside in my day to watch it. And that becomes difficult for a lot of people. So I try to make the videos a little bit shorter because more people are going to have 5 or 10 minutes in their day than they're going to have 30, 40, 45 minutes. If that makes any sense. All right, let me see here. Aqua says, diamond heads are my favorite of the neons or black. Yeah, they're really cool. They've got a really, compared to the regular neon, they just have like a brighter head region, a little bit more greenish, brightish blue. But they're both cool. I like them both. All right, hold on. Lemon says, I really appreciate shorter videos. I can't focus on videos that are too long or slow. Yeah, I hear you. Again, that's just, I think people make videos the way they like to watch videos in some ways. It's the same reason why when nothing, and I mean, there are a few things. All right, so hold on, let me back up. Everybody has their pet peeves, right? My personal pet peeve, let me share with you, is having my time wasted. There is nothing on this earth that will annoy me more when I know that my time is being wasted. It's the one thing that we spend that we can never get back. You can always make more money. You can always acquire new things, but the time, and the older we get, I think the more we realize our time is our most precious asset. And so I really don't like having my time wasted. It's almost a fault with me. I mean, there's downsides to every person. That is probably one for me, is when I just absolutely am wasting my time. So business meetings, when I was in the business world, I really hated them because I knew when you walk into a business meeting, you are probably going to be there for an hour, and everything that is said either could have been said in an email or we could have gotten this thing done in 5 minutes. A lot of people like to repeat themselves over and over and over and over again, and it drives me crazy. It's like, I don't need 57 anecdotes to understand what you're saying. I understood it the first time. Can we please move on? So, oh, that drives me crazy. The other thing that drives me crazy, and even today, I was working on Joanna's bike, and I needed a little bit of the directions weren't clear. There were black and white directions, and it was just horrible the way it was kind of laid out. So I'm like, let me go online real fast, see if somebody's done this. And sure enough, somebody had. It takes them 5 minutes to even begin the process of doing the thing I need to do. And now I'm sitting there like trying to fast forward and try to find a spot where they're actually going to actually do the thing that the video said they were going to do. And 5 minutes later, in a 10-minute video, they're starting it. The video is half done. The video could have been over by the time where it started, right? So whenever I'm doing species profiles or instructional stuff, it's like, get into it, because people don't want to hear how your day is going. They don't want to hear about, oh, remember last week this? No, because half the people that are there for that don't care about what happened to you last week. They want to know about the thing that you're talking about. So that's just me. And now there's nothing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with people who make videos where they are sharing some background before they get into the subject, and not. What I mean is just like personal background, or, yeah, so last week, let me give you an update on this thing or that. That's cool, because there are a lot of people who like that, right? There are a lot of people who get into things enough where there's a big enough audience where it's like, hey, I do want to hear about what's going on in your life last week or the week before, or some other aspect of the hobby that you're interested in. But for me, I like to get into the subjects a little bit faster. And then we can do this, and we can talk like this on the live streams. Okay, let me see. I just saw something. I wanted to. MNC says, no more canisters or sumps for me ever again. Yeah, it just really depends on again, we did that video on the Tank Talk podcast talking about canisters on Monday. And yeah, I've got the canisters on this side, but it was a necessity because I needed it to be somewhat quiet, right? Luckily, I have these mics, and it blocks out a lot of the noise, but not all of it. But there's no way I could have had what would have wound up being, on the 125s, at least 2 hang-on backs, on the 125s, the 75s, and then what was I going to do with the low boy in a gallery feel, right? I can't have hang-on backs hanging off the side like I did before. So it's like, okay, I don't want all these hang-on backs, because even with the self-priming ones, like, which I really, really like, the Seachem titles and the Marineland Pros and even the Aquion Quiet Flows, right? They're pretty quiet, but you can still hear the water hitting the top of the tank, which normally I don't mind. But for this setting, I couldn't have that. And I didn't want to shut the filters off for an hour and a half every single Wednesday, because that's not necessarily a good thing either. So I was left with canisters or sumps, and I wasn't drilling these tanks, so canisters it was. But really large tanks, sometimes you don't have a choice, right? So if you've got a large tank like Whip's got his large tanks, canister filters make all the sense in the world, especially if they're deeper, because very rarely are you going to get hang-on backs with an intake that is going to be long enough for those larger deep tanks, and how many are you going to put on the back of a tank. So I will say that if I had the choice, and it's something I talk about a lot more in that video on Monday, if I had the choice between a canister filter and a sump, it would be a sump 100% all the time for a lot of different reasons, which I talk about on Monday's video on the Tank Talk podcast. Oh my gosh. All right, everybody. I believe it's about time to wrap this bad boy up, because it is 9:30 at night Central Standard Time. And yeah, it's getting kind of late for all of us. So I just, again, want to say thank you to everybody that was here, for our moderators always doing what they do, and for all the people who asked the great questions, and for the super chats and the membership people that came in. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And don't worry, Jose, don't worry. I know you just got here, but next Wednesday, if you can get here at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, you'll be here from the start, and I promise it'll be awesome. So yeah, we'll be back same time, same place next Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you again for being here, and for all you do, and for hanging out with us and the rest of the community. And we will see you next week. Have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye. So long.